Hi, everybody. I'm Joan Churchill, documentary cinematographer slash filmmaker. And it's my pleasure to introduce Gregory Kershaw and Michael Dweck, who are a filmmaking team. They've done a couple of films together, right?
Yes.
I've seen the first film that you did, which is called The Last Race. And this film that we're honoring today is The Truffle Hunters. Amazing, amazing piece of work.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here with both of you guys. It's amazing.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Great. I'm Amy Berg, documentary filmmaker, and also honored to be presenting this Q&A with you guys today. Joan and I both loved the film, and I was very moved by so many different aspects of it. So I think we'll just jump right in. The first question is, I mean, it's such an interesting year to release a film, obviously, with current events and the world and the state that it's in. I'm sure you didn't know what was coming when you were making this film, but just wanted to start by talking about how nature and beauty may have elevated the conversation that you were trying to have in this film, as well as having this conversation in light of a pandemic. And your film, I feel your film offers a beautiful, like a myopic look into this world that maybe takes us away from some of the constant chatter and and the anxiety that people are feeling on a daily basis watching the news. So maybe you could just expand on the themes of nature in the film.
We're always searching for these worlds that haven't been destroyed by globalization and consumerism, and worlds that have deep rooted traditions going on for generations. And these places are really hard to find. And what we found with Truffle Hunters is that here were people that were part of a lively community that actually spoke to one another. They had a very close connection with nature. They had a very close connection with each other and with their animals. And especially the times that we live in right now, where we're so far apart from one another and we're communicating with each other mostly through technology. This film, I guess, presents to you the other world, especially when so much of the world is becoming the same. You now have, very difficult to find these worlds like we found with The Last Race, and we found with this film, worlds that haven't been, that aren't constantly consuming media, and I guess it's just steeped in these traditions.
Yeah, and when you spend time in a place like this area of Italy where we filmed, and you are spending time with people that have this really deep connection with nature, that they don't just admire nature, they live with nature on a daily basis. They're outside. I mean, all the people that we were filming with, they're truffle hunters by night, and they spend their night sometimes 12 hours alone in the woods with their dogs. But during the day, they're out in the fields working. And that's just, it's not nature isn't an adventure, it isn't a wilderness, it's intertwined with their day-to-day existence. And when you spend time with people who live like that, you realize how much, I live in a city, and I think most people live, urban or suburban lives these days that are filled with digital technology and are really, really removed from the natural world. And when you're spending time with people that have this deep connection, you realize like what that does to a human life, how it transforms a human life and elevates it. And the people that we were filming with, most of them are in their 80s. I mean, Carlo's 88 and he's out in the woods all night alone, and they're healthy, they're happy. They have a richness that I feel like that I don't see in the same way in the world that I exist in on a daily basis.
They also don't have cell phones. I mean, the people we were dealing with don't have computers and don't have cell phones. And one of the things that Greg and I were talking about when we were filming there was saying, well, we think we're really connected through technology. Mm-hmm. And what we learned was that these people are really connected, because like one example is that we were looking at one point for a dog that was pregnant to film, because we were trying to just film the whole life cycle of the dog. And we went to, we called one veterinarian and he didn't know. Then we went to a cafe in one town and they said, no, we didn't know either. So we traveled about 40 miles away from that town to just another cafe. We were just, having a cup of coffee. And we walked into the cafe. And the woman says, "Are you the people looking for the pregnant dog?" And I turned to Grace and said, "Did you ask her something before I got in?" She said, "No." And she handed us a piece of paper with a phone number and said, "Here, they're waiting for you right now." And that's what we learned in this world, that they're very, very connected, but they're connected through a world that's through the human world, not through the technology world.
I just have to say that today is January 7th. And yesterday, it was just so insane and such an incredible disconnect because I was trying to watch your film. At the same time, I was watching what was happening in Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
I just, I feel that this film that you've made is like salve to our souls. Everybody, needs to see a film like this to stay sane. It's so beautiful, what you've done. And I thank you. I guess I'd like to jump in with a question about how on earth did you think you could make a film about something so incredibly secret? And I hear you didn't speak the language. So what made you think you could do this film?
I mean, the film, it really, before having a story, we started off with a fascination with this area that Michael and I, we both stumbled upon it separately in traveling in the same summer. And we came back and we were actually finishing up the previous film that we had worked on. We were doing the color correction. We were on a street corner in New York City, and we were talking about this place that we had visited, and it felt magical, and it felt like a fairy tale. It felt like this going back in time, this other universe. And we had both heard these rumors of the truffle hunters, these people that went out into the woods in the middle of the night and search for what's the world's most expensive ingredient, the white truffle, and it's can't be cultivated, and it can only be found in this very narrow strip of land that runs mostly through Italy and a little bit into the neighboring countries. But this idea of this mystery, I guess that's what drew us in there. We said we need to go back and explore, and that started the 3-year process of making a film. And it took 3 years, I think, largely, because I mean, the first year was just trying to find out who the truffle hunters were, and then trying to build the relationships with them that would allow us to film. But I mean, the first, when we first went there, we went, the first thing to do is you go to a trattoria that's serving white truffle, and then you say, "You have white truffle on your menu. Could you tell us where you get the truffle hunters? Could you introduce us to the truffle hunter?" And they said, they said, "Mike, you want to tell the story of the first?"
Yeah, well, we walked in there and we said, "We have truffles in the menu," and he had said, he said, "So, well, who's the person?" And he pointed basically up to the mountain. He took us outside, pointed up to the mountain, and I just said, "There's an old man up there, but we have been doing it. We've never met him before. We have no idea who he is. But every day you see this little wooden brown box outside. I put 50 euros inside the box, and the next morning, by magic, the truffle appears in the box." And he had on the wall, written in pencil from 1940s till now, every truffle he ever purchased and how much he bought it, but of course not the name of the truffle hunter. But that, of course, that intrigued us, and then that started our journey. But when Gregory's saying everything's a secret, it's even a secret from each other. I mean, we finally met a truffle hunter to a priest. I think that was the first time, because we thought the priest would tell us who the real truffle hunters were. And then we went to that truffle hunter, it was Carlo. He's like, "No, I'm not a truffle hunter. I don't know who told you that story." We're like, yeah, the priest told you you're a truffle hunter, so come on. He goes, okay, maybe I get a truffle once in a while, maybe. But they don't tell.
What language are you talking in?
Oh, Spanish. No, we were talking in, well, we don't speak Piemontese, we don't speak Italian. A lot of times we had a translator with us, this woman, Letitia, who became our co-producer. She was with us most of the time. So she was, of course, very, very helpful to us. And she's also from that region, so she also understood this language that's like bantering, and how to kind of communicate with these people as well. But it took us, I remember one day we met these two guys. They were both named Aldo, and they were both 85 years old, and they had known each other, they said, for like 82 years, something like that. And we had asked them, "Are you both truffle hunters?" They said, "Yep." "And do you tell each other if you got truffles that day?" "Never." "Do you know where each other goes?" "Never." "How well do you know each other?" "We have breakfast and lunch together every single day for 82 years since we were little children, and we will not share the secrets." And that's what that world is like. They don't want anybody to know where they found them. They all have different theories about how they've been found. A lot of them deal with water diviners. We traveled around with them. They take the stick, bend it in a knot, and they go searching for truffles, and they think there's an electromagnetic current, and that trees communicate with one another, and it worked. Others think it's 2 days after lightning strikes. Others think it has to do with humidity, the phases of the moon. They each have their own diaries that they keep always under their arms, that they sleep with under their beds, that record for years and years and years, going back generations. They have bookshelves full of these diaries of every truffle they got, the conditions, the climate conditions, how much it weighed, any special weather occurrence that happened. And these are like their Bibles, but they won't share them with anybody, their wives, their children, nobody.
Amazing.
And so much of the filmmaking process for us it was about spending time with the people that we would ultimately be filming. I mean, even, we spent months just really becoming friends with the people that we wanted to film with, sharing meals with them, drinking coffee, drinking wine, building relationships before we really even brought the camera out. And then when we did, we would show them the footage that we were shooting, because for most of them, the idea of a documentary was it was so foreign. I mean, most of them hadn't even been to a movie theater before, and they were curious about what we were doing. I think as we were showing them the footage, I think they started to understand how we were portraying the world. And I think they also knew before we started filming that what they do is the life that they have, the way they interact with the world, this connection to community and the natural world around them. They have a sense that that's disappearing in the world, and that they've held on to something very special. And I think they were eager to share that with the world. And I think through the process of making the film, they had a chance to share their lives, to tell their stories and pass it on. I think there's the immediate concern there, just passing it on to the next generation. I think they want to share it just with the world in general.
Well, you're like ethnographers,
Mm-hmm.
documenting disappearing worlds.
Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
actually it's two completely different worlds.
Mm-hmm.
One is, traditional values, which is going away, and the other is sort of rampant capitalism, which is in ascendancy.
And it became studies. So we would sit in these rooms with them, and we'd have meals with them most of the time. That's the way that you really get to know people in this community, is you just spend time with them. And so we would, before you speak about anything, you have espresso and you have wine, and that goes on for really come back days into days until they feel comfortable with you. But we started to observe how they lived, both being in their world, sitting at their tables, and being in the forest with them. And that actually had a lot to do with how the film eventually was, the language of the film that we used, because we wanted you to really observe and be immersed in this place the way we felt when we were in this place. And a lot of that was, was studies, like you're saying, ethnography. Sometimes we just stand back and look and see how beautiful and simple this world was. And they also
I really
felt
wanted to talk about that too, your process. Yeah. How did you arrive at that? Because it's so stark and simple and unusual.
Like the idea, the initial idea for what the film was, this idea of a fairy tale, I think that's something that hit us very quickly when we were in the area. But figuring out how to tell that story, how to create the feeling, because we wanted the film, it was a documentary, but we wanted it to have a subjective truth. We wanted the images to capture the feeling, like what we felt when we were there, what it felt like to be in the woods with Carlo or in their home while they're eating a meal. And it took us some, you know, I guess it emerged from a style that we had worked on together in the previous film, The Last Race, but it evolved more in this film, where we experimented with styles and realized that we wanted to find a way to have these. The idea was always to make each frame in the film look like a painting. That was sort of our initial goal, and it took us a lot of experimentation to figure out how we could create a verite documentary, how we could observe life, but also have like very precise framing. And ultimately, it was really a matter of realizing we needed to make this film very slowly in order to have all these things come together, these sort of magical moments with the framing and the feel, the sound, the lighting that we wanted. We had to wait. And so like on most days we would shoot one shot, and some days, and if it didn't come together, we wouldn't shoot anything, which it was good that we were producing the film, because I think any producer who was involved in this project would have probably lost their minds, but we could do that because we were working with, you know, it's just Michael and me were shooting it together, and we have a translator and a sound person, so we can move very slowly, and that really, we just kind of embraced. We had to resist this urge to shoot, which you know, on a typical documentary, you know, most documentaries that I've worked on, that's always what you're doing. You're always trying to get the shot. You don't want to miss anything. We had to let things go,
right,
and realize that we were spending enough time with people that often when you follow people and really spend time with them, the same things emerge over and over and over.
Yes.
And if you spend enough time, you'll capture it again. And so it's not a tragedy if you miss some beautiful line that somebody says, because chances are they'll say something similar to that in a future time of filming.
We knew with Carlo and Maria, what kept coming up is that you're 87 years old, and if you break your hip, then our farm is done, and we have to take care of you and not take care of the farm. And then, you know, we, you know, got a phone call, of course, one day. Well, Carlo fell down a hill and, you know, smashed his face on a branch, and he's going to the doctor. And we went to the doctor, and that's what you see in the film, is that he's, you know, he's saying you have to stop, and he's like, basically, I mean, what you see in the film is really 2 minutes of probably an hour of an exam, him getting you know, fixed up. But he's saying, look, you do your job and I do my job. I want to get out in the forest because it's a full moon, in case you haven't noticed. And I'm gonna be out tonight. And this guy's like, okay, whatever. I'm not gonna try to stop you. But when he says, I think I run faster than a deer, he means it. And we couldn't keep track of Carlo. It's impossible. This man weighs, I'd say 135, 140 pounds. He's very thin, but he's muscular, and he's always moving. We always told the sound person, look, while we're trying to just, you know, set up a shot, just hold his hand so we know where he is. And lo and behold, the sound person just turned to grab something, a boom mic, and Carlo was gone somewhere down deep in a valley within minutes. And that's why you have Maria in the film calling, because she's constantly calling for Carlo. But they have, you know, they have stamina, they have health. You know, none of them take medications. They're out 15, 20 miles a night walking after a full day of work in the farm.
With a side.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. But we kept talking about, we were in the van, you know, we were driving a lot. We kept talking about how could we use the full capacity of the cinema experience to transport our audience into this place. And a lot of that had to do, of course, with sound, the soundscape too. We recorded a lot of sounds because it's, and we wish we could have recorded the smells also, because it smells differently. And the wind in one forest that we filmed sounds totally different than wind in another. And then when we would listen to a lot of the forest that like when Carlo was talking about listening to the owls, we'd go in that forest and we'd hear a symphony. If we wouldn't speak, we'd hear a symphony of sounds that were just so beautiful, like a melody. And we recorded these. We recorded everything. We recorded like an Angelos on his typewriter typing away. His floors are like these cold marble floors with a wood burning fire next to him. And we recorded everything, so we understood, again, even for us, how we felt in that place, as a reminder of what we wanted to share with the audience.
I just wanted to echo what Joan was just saying earlier about the beauty of the film. I too I watched the film again yesterday after the kind of worst news day in history. And I felt like it really did. It took me out of everything that was going on in this beautiful way. And it really connected for me yesterday, the second viewing on, why this film belongs on Sony Classics. It felt like, a film that you would see in the international feature category. Just so beautiful. So kudos on that. I wanted to talk a little bit more about you talked about the fairy tale and the painting aspect of your process. I wanted to talk about like plot and editing and like how were you guys worried about what was going to happen as you opened the edit? When did you open the edit? And just, I know it's you're always waiting for something to happen in verite, as we all do in our films, but this is a special film because you never know if you're going to capture that moment. So let's hear from you on that.
Yeah, I mean, it was, we didn't have, a story at all going. I mean, we had no idea. We really had, we had an idea of this mystery, but there was no idea of what the story would be. And everything that, all the story that the film has, and I think there ended up being quite a lot. It came from finding the stories in the lives of the people that we were filming. And I think, those stories weren't even readily apparent when we met these people. And it took a long time to really kind of understand. I mean, I think one of the amazing things that we discovered through this process is that if you spend enough time and get to know anybody, everyone has stories. Everyone has, I mean, they're big stories. I mean, they don't see, you don't see them on the surface, but everyone that we were filming with, they all had really huge decisions that they were making, that they had to make, and things that they were going through that were tremendously significant. And that came through the process of observing their lives and spending time with them. So I think that I don't know, I don't think we were ever worried about not having a story, because it always felt like we captured this feeling, but the stories did start to kind of reveal themselves to us. The challenge, I think, really, it did come to when we got into the editing room, because as Mike mentioned earlier, like any shot you see in the film, we would set the camera down and we would let it run for like 3 hours. And so if you see a minute clip, that's a part of a much longer conversation. And they're conversations where they talk about, they're in the course of 3 hours, they probably talk about 30 different topics. And there's lots of like really interesting bits about all sorts of things that, at minute 2 and minute 6 and so on and so on. So the editing process was, finding the right moment within a conversation that also would fit within this larger story. And then it's a mosaic structure. So we're melding all these different stories together and trying to tell them simultaneously while also sort of making them the same story. So it took a lot of time to find that balance in the editing process.
Right. Maybe even talk about the music as well, because I feel like it's a farce, but it's so emotive in the edit.
Well, we spent quite a bit of time just thinking about music, and we started to work early on with a composer from Brazil, Ed Cortez, who was very patient with us because we were sending him early on in the process. We were sending him scenes that we felt were really we felt right for a certain type of music, and we'd explain to him how we're feeling shot that. So we give him feeling notes of what was in our mind, and he would come back with something like 2 days later that was just incredible. But the process was, he came along for the ride. So for a composer, it's very frustrating to come early on into a project like that. So he was on the project 2 years before we even came to the edit, probably. And we just but it helped us, because a lot of times we were editing to his music.
Did you show him your dailies? Was he being inspired by the? Oh wow.
We did. Yeah, we were going back and forth, and it was a really good process for us. And a lot of times he would say to us, for this, it feels like an Italian pop tune from the 60s. It's a guy named Gianni Fontana. What do you think about this? He sent it, and it just, sometimes it would just work. And a lot of times we'd say to him, we want you to, provide a piece of music, and we're going to describe a feeling for you. We're not going to show you anything. we're just going to provide a feeling for you and come back with us with some music, and we're gonna edit to that piece of music. And he said, no, it doesn't sound right, and it did. I mean, that's what we did a lot of that as well. And then we also were mixing when we got into the mix at Skywalker. We decided to mix some of the soundscape that we have with the music, because we didn't really want the audience to know where the sounds of nature and music were separate. We wanted them to be intertwined, where you couldn't tell, because a lot of times, like, every one of our characters has a distinct sound. Like Carlo has a bell. His Titina, his dog, has a bell around his neck. So you'll always hear, it's very subtle and nobody will probably notice it, but you'll always hear somewhere, when you see Carlo in the film, you'll hear Titina's bell. And with Angelo, you'll hear a town church bell whenever he's typing, whatever. And it's very subtle, but everybody has their own tone. Much like we did in the last race, we want to give every car a personality to it as well, with a sonic personality. And we did the same thing here. And then at the end of the film, we have this beautiful chorus that we did. It's a piece of Follow Me, and it's from Mutiny on the Bounty. And we felt the song was appropriate. And it was originally recorded in Tahitian, but we had it translated to Italian and re-recorded in Brazil with a Brazilian chorus singing in Italian. And that's what you hear kind of at the end, this beautiful chorus of that. And also in the scene with Aurelio and Berba kind of shaving the truffle. One of our characters, Aurelio, who you see with the Berba, he's with the accordion, he's always singing in the woods. We learned that that's part of this world, is music. I mean, they sing, like as a character, he's always singing. And when they're in the woods, a lot of these guys are just constantly singing. So that's one of the reasons why we wanted to bring music into the film. And that's why we just let Aurelio do his thing. We were just trying to film Aurelio just really hunting with Berba, but he just started to break out in this song that he's singing from a 1926 Piedmontese song. And that's what you see. He just starts singing. But that's, a beautiful part of this world.
Yeah.
Can we, since we don't have that much time left, it would be a shame if we didn't talk about the little dogs in this
And
conversation.
the doggy cam. I mean,
yeah.
the film has so few moving shots, and 2 of them are tracking shots, and 2 of them are doggy cams, right? And it's such a completely different, opposite feel from the static, serene shots that you do. It's just fabulous.
Perfect.
Well, we knew. I mean, when we started entering in this world, we knew that the dogs were they were characters in the story. They were just as important, as significant story-wise as the human truffle hunters. And so we wanted to figure out a way to kind of contrast the human perspective, which was these very deliberate, statically framed shots, with something that was more frenetic. We wanted to get in the dog's head. And so initially we tried chasing a dog around with a camera, which didn't work out very well for numerous reasons. And then we started experimenting to build a dog cam, and we found these really elaborate harnesses, and we found these miniature like gimbals, like little Steadicam basically, that you put a GoPro on and put it on a dog's back. And we experimented with all sorts of different really high technology solutions, and like nothing worked. Nothing felt like you were in a dog's head. And then we were walking out of the apartment where we were staying in this little village, and we saw that there was a cobbler right below us, and we said, maybe they have a solution. And we
shoe cobbler.
We went in, the shoe cobbler. We went in and we kind of described what we were trying to do. I think thought we were a little crazy. We were trying to put a camera on a dog's head, but he said, "Come back tomorrow, and I'll have a dog cam mount for you." And we did, and he had a little mount that we put on one of the dog's head. And that night we sent it out with one of the truffle hunters, and they went out for like 3 hours, and they came back and they didn't have a camera anymore. It was lost in the woods.
That's right.
but
we're like, we got gold. Yeah.
But eventually we kept working with him and giving it, we made adjustments for each of the different dogs' heads. And eventually we found a way to create mounts that comfortably fit all the dogs' heads. And we made mounts for each of the individual dogs that fit them. It's the cobbler working with a local kind of metal shop who gave us some small metal pieces. But we worked within the community to make this very, very simple rig. But what we found with the footage that we were able to get from it was so incredible, and it helped us not only get the dog's perspective, which was kind of our initial hope, but it really kind of like allowed us to understand the relationship that the hunters had with their dogs in a totally different way.
One of the things you notice when the doggy cam is being used is the only time the shot is steady is when the dog is looking at its owner. And there's a pause there, which I thought was really interesting.
We learned quite a bit. We didn't actually know how dogs kind of work in the game with the truffle hunters, but we were watching, and like they would looking at the truffle hunter, but other times they would run and just stop and just turn their head around. And we asked somebody from Colombia, there's somebody who's a dog cognition expert in Colombia. They were telling us that the dogs, they become oversensitized. They're smelling and smelling and smelling. They get so excited they need a break just to relax their sense of smell, and then they go on again. And that's what we were kind of experiencing. And then we also noticed how they were interacting with the ground, where you see the nose, and you'd understand how they would smell and stop and dig. Was really interesting. And it's a game between the two. They would, the truffle hunter wants the dog to be satisfied too, right? They're passive. So if the dog doesn't find a truffle that day, he'll bury one without the dog looking. He'll bury one, so the dog finds it. So the dog says, "Look, see what I found." And so it's a beautiful game between the two of them. It's really amazing. Every time you talk about a truffle dog, one of the owners, they get really emotional. They're really attached. So the first day we get invited to Rilio's house for lunch. I was telling you, Joan, he puts 4 plates. There's 3 of us in Berba. He puts 4 plates on the table for lunch and invites us in. He's cooking soup, and he has Berba jumps on the table first, gets served first, and gets the potatoes and the carrots. And then he's okay, now you guys can sit down, and we get the broth. And that's how we had lunch. We understood how that worked. And that's normal. That's how the normal meals were on the table, out of basically porcelain dishes.
And Aurelio is no longer with us, is that right?
No, unfortunately, he passed away about 3 months ago,
And
quite suddenly.
Berba, what happened to
Berba's
Berba?
being taken care of. But Berba, he had 3 dogs, Charlie and Biscuito, and Berba. So Berba's being taken care of by the mayor of the town where he lives. And we keep in touch with the mayor like quite often, like twice a week. But Berba's doing great. They're all really super happy.
I think everyone, before we wrap, I think everyone's going to want to know what the plan is. I know you guys have had to put off your release because of the theatrical and the pandemic. Do you have an update for us on that?
Right now, the theatrical in the U.S. looks like it'll be March 5th. But again, hopefully that'll stick. But again, with this pandemic, it might need to move again. We also have a conservation program that we started, where we've raised quite a bit of money, and we're going to be giving it over to a nonprofit in the area in Piedmont, so that they can really purchase the land where we shot the film. So it'll prevent any sort of deforestation, which is a big problem in that region in Italy, mostly for agriculture. Right. And we have an educational program that will be bringing in young kids with truffle hunters and the dogs into the woods, just to have them experience nature the way they see it. So hopefully it'll inspire the next generation of truffle hunters.
Right.
And who's training the next generation?
Well, it'll be them. It'll be these truffle hunters that they want to do it. They're willing to do it. It's just that the younger generation now is just they're just taken by technology, only because they just don't see the beauty of being in the woods. But we think this is one way. So the schools have agreed in the area. We have, I think, 6 schools have agreed that we can take the children into the woods and teach them. So we think that'll be helpful.
Have you screened the film in the community? Have they seen it?
No, not yet. Not yet. We were planning to do it during the Torino Film Festival, which is in their home base, and then we had the old 1930s movie theater in their town, which they've never been to. None of them have seen a film. But we postponed that, so we're gonna hopefully show it to them this summer. It'd be great.
Go
vaccine! We need to get this out there. Really on the big screen for sure.
I know.
Yeah. Can't wait.
Let's hope.
Can't wait.
Well, thank you both.
Thank you.
So
yeah,
much
thank you so much.
for making this.
We love your work.
film.
Yeah, It's really such an honor to be here with both of you. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank
Well,
you
good
so
luck
much.
with the film.
Yes.
Thank you so much.